morning. This is Georgia Raysman and the Monday Scoop, a guide to better living after age 55. This morning I'm here with a dear old friend, Robert LuPone, who is an actor, a director, and right now the artistic director of MCC.com, which is the Manhattan Class Company,
right.
An acting company and theater company on West 55th Street.
West 52nd.
52nd Street,
sorry.
that has directed and who has directed and produced any number of original and existing productions for Off-Broadway over many years. MCC, starting out as Manhattan Class Company in 1986, was Robert's own idea, germinated in his apartment. But he's had a very active career on and off Broadway in many different roles. So he's seen the theater from inside and out. And what we're going to talk about today is what is the role of theater in our lives, in the lives of people who view it, the lives of people who write for it and carry it out. And having seen it from the inside out and having been part of the people who are acting parts in front of strangers and the people who are producing those parts behind the scenes and the people who are consuming it. I mean, theater is one of the oldest art forms in the world, right? I mean, if not the oldest.
That's how I feel.
You're the oldest art form, and you're the embodiment of it,
yes,
is that right?
exactly.
But when you think about it, go back to ancient Greece, right? It is the way way people represented an idea to society, and in your view, that is still what the role of theater is.
Yes, for me, by the way, thank you for the introduction. It was lovely. For me, I think the best thing that theater can do is educate, and I think that's how a theater affects an audience. There's certainly entertainment where people go to distract themselves, but when you're those aha moments in the theater that you never forget, that is something that struck you deep in your soul and deep in your heart, and it's something that you learned about yourself as a result of that that stimulus. And for me, that's the goal of all theater, and still is for me, because I think that's the most important aspect of theater that we can accomplish. We don't need money for that. We just need ideas. We need imagination. We need creativity. So. I started my theater in my apartment with my partner Bernard Telsey and my partner Will Cantler to bring that to the fore. As an actor, oftentimes you get typed and you end up doing whatever the business needs you for, but there's always so much more you want to do as an artist, and for whatever reasons, in my case at least, I wanted to do more. I certainly could have, but I chose to do this instead, which was to invest in the idea of supporting other artists to find their true voices inside themselves and give a platform for that to flourish. And I think from my standpoint, both on the inside and the outside of theater, I find that very rewarding. I find that rewarding in the sense that not only does it affect me, it also affects the artists, and then the work they do also affects the audiences. And so, at least in my theater, you have a very strong sense of community, a very strong sense of imagination and the investigation. We're not locked into a tradition, for example, that says we have to do this way, and that gives us a great amount of liberation in terms of our freedom and expression.
Well, I think the very first thing I ever saw you in was probably a chorus line.
Yes.
When you were nominated for a Tony for your role as the director in that, and that was a very atypical show in that era. I mean, it was a show about a show.
Yes.
And it was 1975, dare I say it. That's really amazing. And that was so dramatic to see people talking about a theater, a chorus line, a show, a production, in a production that we were all going to see.
Sure.
And so I guess in a way your whole life has been sort of built on that interiority. How do you bring this stuff inside? How do you look at it from the outside? How do you
actualize it? How do you actualize it? I mean, to digress a little bit, I went to Juilliard as a dancer.
A dancer? I remember that.
That's where I started in this business. And my teachers were Martha Graham, Anthony Tudor, and Jose Limon. And that fine art, that pure art that they expressed to me was embedded in something that we're talking about that I've tried to emulate and realize, but they lived it. And they lived it in the dance world as opposed to the theater world, which is not as pure, shall I say. And so trying to actualize some of those ideas that I experienced as a Juilliard undergrad in the world of theater and in the meaning of theater has been my life's pursuit. And to some degree, some plays have done that for me, and some plays have not done that for me. But I think that's the most important thing of an artist. I mean, what is art ultimately? There's a certain disruptive aspect about art.
Well, that was what we said when we talked before. That you thought about art as something that's and theater is not just educational, but getting an idea out there that is confrontational almost. That's making people think, aggressively think about something that's disruptive in a way. And certainly back in ancient Athens, that was what it was all about, right?
Of course.
And it's been that way throughout, with some elements of keeping an eye on the monarchy, say for Shakespeare, on Shakespeare's part,
of course.
or even in the case of opera, keeping an eye on placing something in Puritan America instead of in Rome of the mid-19th century, so you wouldn't offend anybody.
Exactly.
But basically the idea is to get the ideas that are scary out there and present them in a way that people go home and talk about them, and an idea ripples.
That's the thing that interests me, Act 3.
Yeah.
Act 1 is, Act 1 and 2 are in the building, but Act 3 is the conversation you have over dinner, after the show or the next breakfast. That conversation interests me, and I want that conversation to last as long as possible. Oftentimes you go to the theater and you remember a melody, or you remember a moment on a monologue, and isn't that wonderful? You go home and we have dinner, and I was at the theater. Do you know, that is certainly serviceable in terms of the theater, but I'm interested in what happens in Act 3. I'm interested in what bothered you, what made you think, what awakened in you at that particular experience of that night in the theater, and how that's resonating after the theater and in your life going forward.
And you've managed to do this by encouraging playwrights and producing plays.
Correct.
And like more than 500 of them have gone on to be produced elsewhere once they've been worked on in your workshop.
Correct.
So how does that actually work? I mean, somebody comes to you, a young playwright comes to you, and you think they've got talent, and then what happens?
So Miss Georgia is a playwright. She's in front of me, and she's submitted a play that my group has read, and we've talked about it, and we want to invest in it in terms of creating a better play, moving it forward. And so let's say we know a play's never finished, right? But let's say within the bones are there. So then we have a workshop process. We have a process of development where we'll have a reading with professional actors. We'll talk about the play with the playwright and the director if he's there or not, and the actors. And everybody feeds into the pot what it is that we think, our impression of what the playwright's trying to say.
And is it weak in this expression, or is it strong? I mean, is that what your
well, it's about
critique at
what's
some point?
The question of the play, and where are you answering that question? Where are you not answering that question? Where are you distracting from that question? Is there a question to the play? Is this character servicing the question of the play? Is this subplot a distraction from the play? All that sort of stuff. So then from that standpoint of reading, the playwright will get information, absorb it, come back with a rewrite. Let's say the rewrite's better. Okay?
Let's hope.
Let's hope, right? Then we do like a 29-hour. Union allows us to do a workshop presentation of the play, 29 hours working with, again, professional actors and the director. Let's say to get it on its feet, or to look at specific things.
What does that mean, 29 hours?
That you can only rehearse for 29 hours.
Oh.
You can't rehearse longer.
Whoa.
Because it's a cut rate salary for union members.
I see.
And so you're not going to spend
you have to take advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So 29 hours, and in that you may just do the dance of a musical. You may just do the music of a musical. You just may do the book of a musical. That could be 29 hours. Or in a play, you could do 129 about the Act 1. You do a 29 Act 2, or you could do, let's say, 13 hours, not even use the full 29 hours. But all the while, you're continually asking the same questions. Where's the life of the play? What does the audience respond to in terms of us? Because that's who I really am, I'm an audience. And what does the playwright respond to? Oftentimes, Jocelyn Beale is a playwright we did Schoolgirls with. She completely rewrote the play, completely rewrote the play in rehearsal. Something I've never seen in 30 years of doing this. So it try to actualize what's happening in the artist, because they don't necessarily know. It's subjective and objective.
Right.
So I'm talking to you objectively, but subjectively there's a whole other language going on. And so from that position, then you go into possibly a rehearsal period, where you can do a 4-week rehearsal of the play with a weekend performance. Or you can do a 4-week rehearsal period and a 4-week preview period, and then go public. I mean, there's any number of variables. All the while, all of this time is invested, and I'm talking, what I just described could take anywhere between 1 year to 2 years.
Wow.
To get the play up to a standard, a professional standard that we aspire to at MCC
Now,
Theater.
are the same actors then involved with it all along the way, or possibly not?
Possibly and possibly
depending
not.
on their availability.
Yes, some some no. Some playwrights write for that specific actor, and so then that actor's schedule we have to follow. So they're available to say this 3 months, and they're not available for the next 7 months, and then they're available for 3 months. So it's all complicated in that sense. But always it's about the guiding principles are what's the truth of the play? What's the truth of the question of the thesis of the play? Are you accomplishing it? Where are you accomplishing? Do I want to see it? I mean, there are plays that I've produced that I found out the audience doesn't want to see. I think they're wonderful. I think they say something. The audience doesn't really want to see that.
Why would the audience not want to see it then?
Could be depressing. It could be out of its element in terms of time. It could be the wrong timing for that particular subject matter. It could be a disappointment in a cast member, which we thought this would happen, but then this happened, and so now the audience, the reviews have been bad. So, any number of variables will affect whether or not an audience aspires to be part of that experience or not.
So the audience is a big unknown, or is it not a big unknown? Because during this profiling period or this work-on period, you have test audiences?
Oh yeah, we actually do a preview period where we actually learn the most. Forget what I say. The audience is going to tell you about the play. So you write the play, then my group gets in there, we talk about the play, and then we put it in front of the audience, and we call that the third character. And that character will tell us about the play.
Because if it just sits there like this when you're intending some kind of response, either emotional or laughter, and you're not getting it.
You got it. That tells you a lot.
Interesting, because you would think with your level of professionalism, you would know whether you were going to get that response or not, but there's always an unknown.
That's the fallacy. But if everybody knew what they were doing, if we all knew what we were doing, there'd be a hit every show, right? So it's a 90% failure rate. So it's because we're talking about the subjective world. We're talking about abstracts. We're talking about ideas. And ideas aren't necessarily, 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2 in the world of ideas, because it's creativity, it's abstraction, it's imagination. A rose can mean a flower, and a rose can mean love. So where are we? What are we talking about? And that's just a simple example. But my gosh, it's and the audience. And let's face it, we're all doing it for the audience. I don't think there's any artist can claim that they're doing it just for themselves. Certainly that's a part of it, and certainly that's an inspiring part of it, and certainly that's a motivating part of it. But fundamentally, you have to, at least in the theater, somebody said, I forgot his name. This is a public business. This is a watch me business. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I remember because we had known each other a long time, and when we were children, and your sister Patty was a child, I distinctly remember thinking, even when I was 8 or 9, and she was 7 or 8, or whatever, she was a couple of years younger than I. This is a child who likes performing. She likes the response that we give her when she does something on the lawn in front of your parents' house. And so I thought that audience appeal, and that's been something that struck me for every actor that I have ever encountered on a personal level. There's that desire for audience response or audience approval one way or another.
It's a watch me business. It really is.
Yeah.
And there's something.
A watch me business.
Yes, it's also addicting. There's no question about it. It's addicting. I mean, you walk out on stage and the house erupts. That affects you.
Yes, of course, naturally.
And that's the contract. I'm who I am, and you like it, so therefore we get together, right?
Yeah.
When we don't like it, when the audience doesn't like it, or
then you don't like the audience either.
Exactly.
You're annoyed at them.
Exactly.
Isn't that interesting? So it seems like such a chancy sort of business in so many ways.
Oh yes.
I'm thinking about us in our personally in our varying career paths. Mine has been so very rational, having been, a lawyer and a tax lawyer on top of that. And yours has been to take such a career path that has been full of, pitfalls and chanciness and risk and uncertainty.
Yes.
And I admire that no end, because I couldn't do that in a million years. But it must take a certain personality, not only to be able to put yourself out there and say, how is the audience responding, but to put yourself out there and say, I don't know if this is going to work, and that's okay.
It certainly makes a creative and interesting life. I say this, there's no better life, I keep saying to people, because the cast always changes, the lines always change, the experience always changes, the subject matter always changes. There's never a consistency other than you're white and you're, an old man now. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not going to play the young man lead, but so I'm typed a certain way as an actor. And in terms of so that's one aspect that's always exciting, and there's always going to be someone in the cast you like and someone in the cast you don't like. There's the society is a cast is part of society. Society is part of a cast, no matter what the subject or experience is. So that's all part of the world that I live in, and that to me is fascinating and interesting. And I really, there's something about grease paint and sawdust. I just really like that. Now they don't say that anymore. I'm dating myself, but there's something about show people. There's something about the void, jumping into the void and creating out of nothing, the suspension of disbelief. Do you know what I mean?
Well, if we turn now to what theater means to people on the audience side, or people who are, say, over 55 and thinking about what they can be. I mean, you in your own theater company have created a sense of community, and to me, theater as a community is the way that people over 55 can start to participate in it on a personal level. How do you feel about that, and how do you see that happening?
It's a really interesting question, because obviously as I've aged, the question of relevance in terms of the next generation of theater artists and where I sit with that, I come to this present time with a history that is or is not applicable to today in terms of the expression of today in terms of theater. So what theater accomplishes is community, because you're all like same with sports. There's things that you can do that a group gets together, they squabble and they argue and they laugh and they cry and they create something together, and then they present it for an audience. And that joy, the experience of that creates joy, it creates camaraderie, it creates a sense of accomplishment, creates purpose. And I think that's a great value. But I think all of us have had that experience in some way, shape, or form up to this point in our lives. So the question is, Chapter 3, what are we going to do in Chapter 3 that facilitates this kind of experience that we want to perpetuate, because we're still alive, we're not dead, we want to perpetuate, and we want to accomplish, in a sense, even more. Not necessarily materially, but personally, because you now have the time. So what does that mean? So it means that you take a piece of work that you're maybe scared of, that you're not right for, that it makes you uncomfortable in a way in which that you have to do a deeper investigation of the whys, the wherefores, the whos about this particular subject matter. That you get around people who are supportive of you, but not willing to let you off the hook in terms of this adventure. It means that you challenge yourself with things that you've never, ever done. So I've been an actor my whole life. I've been a dancer my whole life. I've been an artist. I've got a gold watch in acting, dance, and now artistic directorship. What I have never, and I've talked about, without a formal literary education, I've been talking about plays since 1983 and helping playwrights write their plays.
So you're going to write a play?
No, I'm going to write, I don't know what I'm going to write, but maybe it will be a play. That's a perfect example. I've decided in Chapter 3 to challenge my greatest fear, to do something I know nothing about, and it's writing. And I think that is the opportunity I have to aspire, to grow, to continue the evolution of myself creatively, personally, intimately, and socially. And so that's what I would say to anybody at my age, your age, who is looking at the end of their professional career, in retirement, if you will, what to do with yourself. To really take on those things, not the things that you always wanted to do but never had time for. In a way, that's a cop-out. But to take on something that you're not qualified at all to do.
That's such an unexpected answer. That's not the answer I expected at all, but it's a great answer. It really is a challenge. How many people have that courage, I wonder? Because it is so much easier to do the cop-out and say, I've had the bucket list, and I've always wanted to do, whatever, grow rhubarbs.
Yes.
And now I'm going to grow those rhubarbs. Instead of saying, forget the rhubarbs, you should go out there and, I don't know, be a doctor in Africa.
Yes.
Or something totally, that really, really throws you into the and
exactly.
Or go out there and be an actor and do Electra.
Exactly.
And you've never done anything even remotely like that.
I mean, look, you have a history of, you have a life history behind you. You have all of that to draw on, which you didn't have when you were 20, and you have all to draw on to create for yourself your next chapter in life. You can always put the pen down and say, that's not me. You can always say no to it, but the imagination to create from that is what I'm saying, to me at least. Now, have I written something yet? Yes. Is it good? No.
Yeah.
I can tell you it's not good. I can tell you that I've been rejected in terms of what I've written 6 times over. I can tell you that, and that's fine, because my ego's not invested in its success as much as it is in my self-revelation and my shared revelation.
That may relate to all of these memoir classes that we read about too. I think that may be helping people bring out who they think they are and what their life means in that sense. But no, it's interesting to be able to take that chance with who you think you have become after all these years,
Yeah.
and whether or not you are who you think you are.
Yeah.
And whether you can do something more with your life at this stage rather than the rhubarbs. And
Exactly. I still act. I still, I still run the theater company. And as I now sail into the sunset, I may just take that acting skill to either an acting class or a community theater or a local theater, because I'm not trying to make a career out of it. I'm trying to pick roles now that are that not necessarily challenge me, but that are of interest to me.
well, for many people, even going into community theater might be something that they have been dying to do all their lives and have never had the chance, and that's what I think is interesting.
The only thing about that which I fear is that you have a fantasy about it, and then when you discover grease and war paint, grease and sawdust, it's not as glamorous. It's really hard work, and the audience only sees the net result of all that hard work, and so therefore I want to do that based on that reality, as opposed to what it means to work 12, 14 hours a day, what it means to struggle to learn lines, what it means to wear a costume you're not comfortable with, what it means to do a dance number that you're self-conscious about, what it means to sing a song without a voice, what it means to say a monologue in that one section you've never understood, which I did a play called Pericles by Shakespeare, and the director and I in my monologue both agreed we never knew what he was talking about, and I still had to go out there and say that monologue.
Yeah.
So there are those kinds of things, but again, the impetus for all of this is this imagination within the human spirit. The idea, I share that, I know you own that, I know we held hands with that as kids. We can still do that in the theater, we can still do that in a seminar, we can still do that in an interview, and I think that's what we're about now in Chapter 3 for our lives. How to make that front and forward for our lives, because we've raised a family, because we we got Social Security, we had it, we've done all the things that we're responsible citizens, we vote, we do all of that stuff. So now's the time to enjoy the possibility of your imagination taking off.
I think that is a perfect way to end this discussion, Robert, and it's really a wonderful thing, a wonderful takeaway. It's the scoop for this week.
Well, good, I'm glad.
Good.
It's great to be with you.
Thank you. It's so great to be with you, and thank you so much for coming and doing this.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much. This is this week's Monday Scoop, and we'll see you next week.